The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but underneath are ravenous wolves. By their fruits you will know them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Just so, every good tree bears good fruit, and a rotten tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a rotten tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. So by their fruits you will know them." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I'm finding it very, very difficult to preach today. We're in this section of Kings in the Old Testament where God basically seems to be advocating violence to purge yourself of your enemies, not to make compromises, not to discover ways of peacefully living together, but get rid of them. That's the only solution. Right here, as we're getting towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, where yesterday we heard Jesus saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now he is introducing a very black and white, polarizing, if you will, criterion for how you are supposed to judge others, which, judge not lest you be judged. On the other hand, if you don't like their fruit, they're bad, and get rid of them, they'll be thrown into the fire. Now, bear with me. And then we've got a saint today who, along with Saint Athanasius, a generation before him, I think is probably one of the most unpleasant and polarizing figures in the early church. And many scholars are now looking at the conflict between Saint Athanasius and Nestorius. We don't put a saint in front of his name because he lost, but he was the patriarch of Constantinople, whereas Athanasius was down in Alexandria. And there seemed to be a real rival for power between the two of them. And a part of the strategy was Nestorius came up with a very nuanced way of looking at the incarnation, which left a lot to be desired, but probably would have been better addressed in a spirit of dialogue rather than confrontation, which happened at the Council of Ephesus. Without going into further detail, though, what came out of the Council of Ephesus was the basis of our entire subsequent devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And that seems to be what Cyril of Alexandria is noted for, and that's what we prayed about. One of the things that this tells me is that, left to our own religious instincts, we are going to tend towards polarization. And that's one of the things that God had to deal with throughout history. And I think the real answer to this polarization, dividing, and which obviously we see it in the world and the church today, all over the place, not just the United States. But this polarization is getting so extreme that there is no middle ground, really, that seems to be able to be standing. And it's sort of like, take your choice, one side or the other. And yet we have to be committed to discovering, upholding living in accord with and communicating the possibilities of the common ground that is based on understanding and the common ground that is based on our acknowledgement of our relationship with one another is based on God, is based on the fatherhood of God. We are one family in God. Let's behave that way. And I think that the direction, I don't know that an answer can be found to this, but I think that the direction to addressing the polarization today is doing what saints have done all along. Contemplation of the cross of Jesus Christ. You could take that in, nonviolence as the answer, yes, but I think underneath that nonviolence is a willingness to put yourself right in the middle and be, in a sense, the buffer, and the buffer is always going to be crucified. Put yourself as the buffer in between the polarized extremes, and in some ways give witness by letting yourself be crucified, all the while upholding our common ground, our common heritage, our common identity, and trusting in God that just as Jesus' crucifixion was not the last word, but was only the doorway to God having the last word in the resurrection, so too, whatever crucifixion we might suffer for maintaining this common ground, God's going to have the last word, and trusting in that last word of God.